Did you start that one yet?
Yep.
You did?
Started, yeah.
Oh.
Actually, I go.
Good?
Yeah.
Hey guys, Anthony Pietrobono here. Just talking today on how exactly to gain muscle, so what the best way to gain muscle is. So we're going to go over two different ways to gain muscle. We're talking about myofibrillar hypertrophy, and we're also talking about sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. Now, these are two different ways of how you're going to elicit muscle growth, and you're going to want to focus more so on myofibrillar hypertrophy. We're going to discuss these two topics. After I go into full detail on exactly what each of these are, I'm going to dive into some Q&A. So I have some questions that I gathered from Instagram and Facebook posts. So starting off, myofibrillar hypertrophy is responsible for the majority of our muscle gain. So this is essentially 75% of all the muscle we're going to gain is through myofibrillar hypertrophy. And we're going to be wanting to try to achieve this from lifting heavier weights, really taking advantage of mechanical stress and working in the 3 to 8 rep range with longer rest periods. Now, you're going to want to break down the muscle tissue and have them repair bigger and stronger. That's essentially the mechanism of myofibrillar hypertrophy, and that's responsible for the majority of our muscle gain. So you want to have the majority of your training in that 3 to 8 rep range with longer rest periods, really focusing on progressive overload, so that way we're doing more total volume on a week-to-week basis. So once the majority of your program consists of training that's responsible for that, which is more so of mechanical stress, then the rest is going to be your pump training. And that's how you're going to be getting that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. And that's where you're also going to be noticing where bodybuilders tend to have more of a rounder, fuller muscle belly compared to other lifters, because bodybuilders they really take advantage of more pump training, and that's going to be more responsible for about 25% of your potential muscle gain is coming from sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, and that's where we're going to be pretty much from metabolic stress and cell swelling. So metabolic stress and cell swelling is how you're going to be actually gaining muscle through that mechanism. And metabolic stress is essentially where you're working in higher rep ranges with lower rest periods and lower loads. So that's really where you're having anywhere from the 10 to the 20 rep range, and you're having lower rest periods, somewhere around 60 to 90-second rest intervals, and more metabolic stress. You're accumulating more metabolites like lactic acid buildup, and those are indirectly stimulating protein synthesis to grow your muscle through another mechanism. Now, this pump training should be responsible for just about a quarter of your training, because it's responsible for about 25% of your muscle gain. So you don't want the majority of your training to be pump training, going for the pump. You want to have that more so towards the end of the workout, after you've already gotten your heavier lifting out of the way in the beginning of the workouts. So that's just how you kind of want to structure your training to get the most out of your training, so you're gaining the most amount of muscle possible. Once you've done that, and you've got 75% of your training from that, 25% of your training from more pump training, then you can go ahead and take a look at different set intensifier techniques, different ways of periodizing your training. You always want to make sure you're progressive overloading, so you can do that in a number of ways, structuring your training that. But we're going to dive into some Q&A now, guys, because I have some questions on from Facebook messages and also Instagram DMs. So I actually just wrote some down that we had. So we had Zach from Instagram. Zach from Instagram asked, how much cardio is considered too much when trying to lose body fat? So how much cardio is too much when you're trying to lose body fat? That's a great question, Zach. I'm just gonna write it down here. Great question. So it's how much cardio is too much? Essentially, he's asking how much cardio is too much, so that way he doesn't lose muscle during his cut. So he doesn't want to lose muscle during his cut. How much cardio is too much? Now, that's going to depend on what type of cardio you're doing and how much. So there's two types of cardio, essentially, that you kind of want to be using. There's high-intensity interval training, and there's low-intensity steady state. So that's HIIT and LISS. Those are the acronyms for that. How much cardio is too much? Now, how much cardio is too much is if it's impairing your recovery, or if it's impairing your gym performance to a large extent, then it's going to be too much cardio and you want to back off, and you'll want to try to create more of a caloric deficit from other ways. Now, another way of creating a caloric deficit would be to put less energy in, so eating less. If your cardio is not impairing your recovery or your gym performance, then you're really good. As soon as you start noticing that from your cardio, you're noticing that one, you're still always sore. You still feel that muscle soreness going into the next session. Clearly, your recovery is impaired from something. Most likely, either you're overtraining, you have too much volume, or you're overstimulating with the cardio. So that's a clear sign you want to back off on the cardio. But again, most of your cardio should be low intensity steady state, especially if you're going for lower percentage of body fats. That's when your recovery starting to really be impaired, and you need to really focus on just having all of your cardio in the form of low intensity steady state. Now, low intensity steady state can be a form of walking, can be on Stairmaster, elliptical, whatever your preferred cardio choice is, but it's gonna be something low intensity, obviously, and it's gonna need to be longer because it's gonna be needing to actually make up for that calorie burn. Like we know high intensity interval training burns more calories later on. Low intensity steady state, you'll have to have somewhere in between from 20 to 60 minutes per session to get a good amount of calorie burn out of that. And you'll want to try to place it away from your training so that way it's not impairing your training and you're doing enough. So that's exactly how you want to make sure that your cardio isn't too much. If you start noticing those signs, pull back on the cardio and then just eat less. So lower your intake. If you're having 2,100 calories per day, you're going to want to drop that intake just by like 200 calories, and you can keep your cardio the same instead of trying to up your cardio if you're noticing you're just too drained to get into your weights. Because if you got to understand, those weights are exactly what builds your muscle. Those weights are exactly what's going to keep your muscle. So if your workouts are suffering big time, you're going to be losing that muscle much quicker, and you're not going to keep the same look that you're striving for throughout that fat loss phase, right? So there's that question down. We got next question from Michelle. Michelle from Instagram. And again, if you guys have more specific questions on that, if you want to elaborate more, I'll put in the comments there on whatever platform you're there. We're streaming live on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Next question from Michelle. She said, what is the best way to bring up a lagging muscle group? She said her arms seem too small for the rest of her body. So arms seem too small. Best way to bring up a lagging body part. Best way. Great question, Michelle. Best way to bring up lagging muscle group. So, best way I can say right off the bat, number one way is going to be to increase your training frequency. That's the typical route to go. Now, it's going to depend on a lot of factors. So, best way to bring up a lagging muscle group and her arms specifically. So, arms specifically. Generally, let's say, best way to bring up a lagging muscle group is typically to do more volume on that muscle group, but you can't always just add more volume because your training could be a lot at the moment. What's going to influence this as well is you need to be in a caloric surplus. So if you're in a fat loss phase and you're trying to bring up a muscle group, it's not going to work very well. Just think of the thermodynamics there. If you're eating less calories than your body needs, there's no reason for your body to gain more muscle. And if you're trying to bring up a muscle group that typically does not grow well for you to begin with, then if you're in a caloric deficit, then that's going to make things worse. And you add more volume, you might actually tend to overtrain that muscle because you don't have enough nutrients to recover it, and you could be driving yourself in the hole even further. So number one, if you're wanting to bring up a lagging muscle group, be in a caloric surplus. So eat more calories than your body needs. Specifically, obviously, you're going to need protein. When your protein needs are met, i.e. if you have at least 1 gram per pound of body weight per day. So if you're 140 pounds, you're going to want 140 grams of protein in each day. In a caloric surplus, you want the majority of your intake coming from carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are going to be the best for your performance, best for recovery, best to be sparing those amino acids and actually improving and accelerating that recovery and also reducing that inflammation. So best way to bring up arms for her arms specifically, number one would be to increase the frequency. So whatever your training split is, on those arm sessions. With that, you need to be careful of your exercise execution. Now, this is a huge pointer here. If you're not executing the exercises properly, you're not getting that exact optimal amount of recruitment from those muscle fibers because you're not performing it right, you don't have the right things locked down, then you can't really be improving your muscles. So it depends on the exercise. You know, some people don't feel specific exercises well. It could come down to their exercise execution, and that could be the reason why they're not progressing on a specific muscle group or a specific lift because they don't have the proper execution. Now, you want to double check that. I actually have a full guide on how to execute every exercise, 6-step guide on how to perfectly execute every exercise, and I'll be sharing that. It's coming out in about a week. It'll be free. It'll be a free guide, step-by-step PDF, pretty much like a mini ebook with pictures to make sure that you're doing that right. So actually, I'll just send you that later, Michelle, so you'll have that. And number one way, increase frequency or add some more training volume. So frequency or more volume in a given session is the best way. Stay in the caloric surplus. That's where you can answer that one. That's all there. So great question. I got 2 more on here, but I think I'll just, yeah. So we'll go into these 2 more. So we got Dan from Facebook. Dan from Facebook asks, what's the best training splits to gain muscle fastest? Best training split. Training split to gain muscle the fastest. So this is another depends question. Depends on the person. Depends on a lot of things. The best training split. I know that my writing is not good here. I'm just gonna get it on here fast to gain muscle fastest. Best to gain muscle. There we go. That's what we got. Best training split to gain muscle is Dan from Facebook. Pretty much, best training split's gonna depend on where you're trying to gain that muscle. Depends on if you'd like to focus more on your chest, shoulders, your legs. Depends on what's lacking for you. You don't want to individualize that program depending on what you want to grow faster than other muscle groups. But for a general training split, I would definitely say it depends. First, it depends how often you're training. If you're gonna train 5 to 6, like 5 days a week, if you're gonna train like 5 days a week, then I would definitely go with a push-pull legs routine. So you might want to have 1 push-pull legs, do 3 days in a row, 3 days on, 1 day off, push 1 day, pull another day, and legs the 3rd day with a rest day, and then repeat. That would be a fantastic one to grow overall muscle development. And if you do that, then I would highly recommend and encourage that you have the first 3 focusing on heavier lifting. So you're working in that more so of the 3 to 8 rep range. And then the second cycle of the push-pull leg routine, I would definitely go and encourage that you're training more in like the 6 to 15 rep range. Have those 2 splits. So push-pull legs heavy, rest, push-pull legs light, rest and repeat, go back and forth. That's a phenomenal one if you can train about 5 days a week. If you can only train 4 days a week, then I would definitely recommend an upper-lower split. So upper body 1 day, lower body the next day, rest, upper body next day, lower body, and then you can rest twice and repeat that. Same thing, you want to do the upper-lower heavy rest, and you want to do the upper-lower lighter rest. So those would be the 2 best routines you could possibly do, I would say, for overall development, because again, you guys want to think about this, you want to be stimulating those muscles twice a week. So ideally, you want to hit every muscle group twice a week. That's pretty much been proven around to be near optimal. Depends on the person again, obviously, but pretty much optimal for recovery because your muscles, muscle protein synthesis is spiked for up to 72 hours after the training session, pretty much peaking around 48 hours. So you can train a muscle group. You want to train a muscle group every 3 to 4 days to take full advantage of that muscle gain. So best way to do that is train every muscle group twice a week. So that would be the best split there. I didn't get the name. This one's on nutrition. So just to wrap this up, on nutrition, question here was, how many meals a day should I be eating for fat loss? So how many meals a day? How many meals per day should I be eating? Should I eat? How many meals a day should I eat for fat loss? Now I feel like this one is more controversial, so this is a great question. For fat loss, specifically, I don't know if you guys need to read that. How many meals per day should I eat for fat loss? The goal is fat loss. I'm trying to lose 15 pounds in the next 2 months. It's a decently aggressive goal. So it honestly does not matter much. It's very minuscule. Ideally, well, you're gonna want to eat 3 times throughout the day to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis throughout the day. Multiple feeding windows of spiking muscle protein synthesis. Now, research has actually also shown that there wasn't any real negligible results in terms of muscle gain. In terms of muscle gain, this is also going to apply to fat loss, because in the fact that if I'm eating 2 meals a day and there was inferior results of muscle gain at 2 meals a day compared to 5 meals a day, then when you bring it over to fat loss, if you have 2 meals a day and you saw inferior results of muscle gain, then that could also mean that you could lose some more lean body mass in a fat loss phase, if that was the case with that study. Now, I actually there's been a ton of studies on this, but once all the muscle group was the same, they actually saw inferior results, so worse off results in people who ate 6 to 8 meals comparison to that 2 to 5 meal window, because the total protein was accumulated to be the exact same. So when total protein was the same, the protein in each meal was actually too low to fully spike muscle protein synthesis to make an impact on muscle gain. So just to answer that, short version, 2 to 5 meals, whatever's best for you. 1 meal per day would be inferior, because you're not only spiking muscle protein synthesis once in the day. Personally, for that, I find personally, and from anecdotal evidence talking to my clients, they would also say that higher meal frequency tend to be worse off, because it would be too small. When you're on like 1,800 calories a day and you're having 5 meals a day, then you're only getting, each meal is going to be like 350 calories. So those are small meals. That's not going to suffice. It's going to feel like a little snack, and it's going to tease you. I wouldn't like that. Clients wouldn't like that. So I personally like to drop my meal frequency. When I'm cutting, I like to have 3 to 4 meals per day. And you can totally take advantage of intermittent fasting. It's not a big deal. You can fast for the first few hours of the day, whatever eating window works best for you. You won't lose all your gains if you are fasted for the majority of the day, as long as you end up getting your total daily intake. And it can actually be a great strategy if you're busy throughout the day. So if you have something you're doing in the first part of your day, later on, you can have that first meal before your training session around 1 p.m. Go train, and then come back. You have another big meal, and you have a third meal before bed. So 3 meals works perfect if you can fast for the first hours of the day. If you're doing intermittent fasting, I would recommend something like black coffee and some sort of carbonated drink to get you through the day. And that's a great strategy there. There's also, obviously, there's tons of different strategies. You could talk different dieting. There's paleo, there's ketogenic diets, tons of different stuff. But for meals, short answer, 2 to 5. Personally, 3 to 4. I like personally 3 to 4. And that's what I'm gonna end them all. Like,
Alright, that's ended. Oh, that one didn't run. So it can't connect the live video. You think that didn't run?
probably not.
Maybe you needed some other. This one was okay. This one ran. Live video ended. 52 viewers. That's weird. Did that one run?
Yeah, I'm trying to end it.